Co-owning, training a dog. Ooh, interesting. My boyfriend has a reactive dog, and as we get more serious, we're spending more time together. I've noticed lots of bad habits that don't align with how I manage my dogs. Luckily, our dogs get along great, but if we move in together, is it realistic to just let him do his own thing with his dog and keep doing my thing with my dog? I worry his dog's habits and lifestyle could work against all the training I've done with my dog. Or on the flip side, I'll look like an ass if I treat his dog the same way I treat my own. Some of his bad habits include using an improperly sized prong collar, allowing the dog to walk at the end of the leash during walks. Dog is a little overweight and not food motivated. Gets lots of table food. Dog barks at all other dogs outside, and my boyfriend coddles her and tries to calm her down. Also coddles her inside when she is displaying anxious behaviors. When I've brought certain things up, he basically says that he knows his dog isn't perfectly behaved, but he's willing to live with the imperfections. His dog is also slightly smaller and easier to control. Generally, she's very well behaved, and I don't think she's a crazy dog in need of a lot of training. I'm more worried about the implications on my own dog if two dogs in the same household have different sets of rules. As always, I look forward to hearing more of your discussions. Thank you so much for doing what you do.
Man,
this is a good question.
That is
it's a good question, right? And we could equate this to a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Right? So, I talk a lot about. I've been a big Dave Ramsey fan for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. Total Money Makeover, right? Like his philosophies on money and life and stuff like that. Like I've always resonated very well with it. And one of the things he talks a lot about is that looking at your financial success that you have, right, with your partner, right, with your husband or wife, right, is you've got to work together on those things and have similar goals to be able to achieve the biggest results. Because if you're doing things on your own and the other person is doing things on your own, you're not really working in a partnership. Mm-hmm. I think that applies similarly to this. Mm-hmm. And if we humanize this, which we love humanizing things to help people understand concepts better, let's look at this if this were children, right? And one child had one complete set of rules. The other child had a completely different set of rules. And you guys could not align yourself on how you think you should raise children. That is going to cause issues. Not necessarily forget that your dog's going to learn skills from this dog or the other way around, or this kid's going to learn bad habits from this one and this one from this one, or anything like that. But it's going to show that you guys aren't on the same page about things that are very important. Right? Mm-hmm. Animals, kids, in-laws, money, right? Like all those types of things that we want to make sure we're on the same page about. Now, from everything that you read or you typed out in this, it doesn't sound like this guy is by any means oblivious to his dog's bad habits.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't sound like by any means he's giving you pushback from the standpoint of like, no, I know more about this than you, or the stuff you want me to do isn't working or anything like that. It just sounds like he's just kind of okay with his dog's behavior, right? Mm-hmm. And doesn't necessarily understand the importance of getting past some of those types of things, right? Now, I obviously had the benefit of when I got married being a dog trainer, right? And I met my wife because she brought her dog in for dog training. So I had the added benefit of being able to just like play dog trainer in the house and be like, we should do these things and we shouldn't do these things. And that's just kind of what we're going to do. Right.
Yeah.
But when I work with families that have multiple people or couples, right, we see this a lot, right, with couples that come in and one person likes living a certain way with the dogs. The other person likes living another way with the dogs. Right.
Yeah.
And I always say, you're not going to get it where both of you guys are doing the exact same shit all the time, right? Obviously, consistency is important, right? And obviously, we want to make it as consistent as possible from the standpoint of like the rules that are being followed and this and that. But inevitably, one person is going to behave a little differently than the other person around the dogs. And instead of looking at this from the standpoint of your dog does certain things and his dog does certain things, right? I would look at it more of a unit of like, hey, let's educate him on the important thing. Let's fight the important fights, right? So reading this again here, right? Improperly sized prong collar, right? If we could educate him on why a prong collar should be fitted properly, how it's safer for the dog, how ultimately it's going to get the point across better, it's going to allow you to be able to communicate more effectively. That's going to be an important fight to fight, and there shouldn't be a ton of pushback on that. Like, hey, let's take a couple links out of this thing. Yeah. Let's give it a go. You know what I mean? I think that's an easy one to communicate, right? Allowing the dog to walk at the end of the leash during the walk, and especially with the dog being a little anxious and barky and stuff like that, I would say that's another important one to fight, where I would be communicating clearly, listen, we could get some of these anxious behaviors under control, right? The dog is obviously displaying these anxious behaviors because we're not giving enough direction while we're out and about. So by giving the direction, we could actually reduce the dog's anxiety and make it be happier, right? And then we could still give the dog freedom. A lot of people look at when we start applying rules and structure that it's us restricting freedoms from the dog. That's not the case, right? We want to give the dog direction sometimes and then show him all the places we can give the freedom, right? When we get to the park, we could let the dog run and be free and chase a ball or sniff around and all that kind of stuff. But in certain situations, it's important that we do that. We could fight that fight, right? Overweight and not food motivated, though I really care about that, obviously. Initially, that probably wouldn't be a fight that I'm super concerned about. Right? It's not going to impact the dog's behavior that much. You know what I mean? Again, there's plenty of conversation of like, overweight dogs, obviously you look at it with humans, right? Humans that are unhealthy and out of shape are going to, be a little bit more anxious, a little bit more antsy, right? They're not going to be feeling as good, obviously. So it's an important one. It's definitely something we would want to kind of get to, but I wouldn't worry too much about that one initially, right? The coddling, calming her down. Everybody that does that with the right intentions. Right? Everybody that coddles their dog, hugs them when they're anxious, is petting them constantly, they do it because they want the dog to feel more secure, right? So once we educate them, like I've never struggled with once I've educated somebody on why petting them when they're in an anxious state of mind is so terrible for them that they've still continued to do it, right? So that's an important one you could fight, obviously. And those are really the behaviors, right? So a lot of this is an education thing, right? Let's get them to understand why some of these things are important. Let's start having the conversation before you move in on, hey, this is how I live with dogs. It's a very important thing to me, and I would like for us to be on the same page with that and do it in a way where Dave Ramsey talks a lot about, because there's a lot of similarities between this and how he talks about coaching his families to talk to each other about money and getting on the same page with things, because most couples that are together don't agree at all about that, and that's obviously a very important thing. Right? And he says most people that try to convince their significant other on like why they should be being better with money do it in a very belittling way. They do it in a way where it's like they're talking down to the person. They're saying, you don't know anything, and I know more than you. And it's subconscious. You're not doing it on purpose, obviously, but you're doing it in a very like I'm telling you what to do way. Right? Which puts people into a defensive state of mind.
Shield
right
up.
Shield up. Like, why would I want to do that? Like, you're not giving me any reason to be motivated to it. Where, again, if you educate on, like, I want to have this partnership with you, right? Like, I'm not perfect, right? Like, my dogs aren't perfect by any means. Your dog's not perfect, but I want to do better for them, right? And by us working on the same page, right? And by us being a little bit more consistent about the rules amongst our dogs and treating them like a pack as opposed to, like, the two stepchildren or something like that, right? They're going to be happier. We're going to be happier. Everybody's going to be able to live a more enjoyable life together, and we'll have the added benefit from a relationship standpoint on teamwork, team building, and developing our relationship further by striving towards the same goal together. Right? So that's so much of this from the standpoint of, let's say that doesn't work for whatever reason. Like, obviously, I would question your ability to work together a little bit, right? That's an important thing, obviously, right? But, I always say, like, let's say you have a house guest staying over for a week or something like that, and that dog is poorly behaved. It's not an excuse for your dog's behavior, right? So ultimately, let's say the other person, because we work with plenty of couples that a lot of times we see this with a guy, honestly. The guy does not want to change what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right? And the wife is very, very like adamant on like, I need this dog to behave with me. You know, in worst case scenario, in those types of situations, as long as you're consistent about the rules with your dog, when you're present, that dog will still listen to you. Right? I don't give a shit what you do when you come into my house.
Yeah.
My dogs are still expected to listen to me.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I don't give a shit if another dog comes over the house. My dogs are expected to listen to me.
Yeah.
Right? So I wouldn't be worried about that, but I would be looking at this from the standpoint of how do we work together more? How do I help educate him in a way that isn't belittling him, right? How do I fight the important fights first and then work towards the bigger picture of just in general, like feeding habits and all those other habits and stuff like that, right? And I would just start getting him to understand how important it is to you, right? Because if he understands how important this is to you, if he loves you and cares about you, he should want to support you through that with whatever that looks like.
Yep.
So I think that's the biggest way I would look at this.
Yeah.